And join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a public meeting of the Board of Selectmen. It's not a public hearing, although the chair reserves the right to call on any interested attendee to make a brief comment or question on the item that's before the board today. There are copies of the meeting's agenda on the table as you come in, as well as a set of the materials that the board will be reviewing and potentially acting upon today. Item number 2 is approval of minutes from the first meeting this month, held on June 15th. I'll entertain any corrections or amendments. If they're not, then it's moved by Mr. Littback.
Second.
Without objection. Item number 3, updates. On June 20th, the town was one of several municipalities who participated in the governor's annual statewide emergency preparedness planning initiative. This occurred over at the Public Safety Complex in the EOC, and the nature of the exercise was on a major tropical storm event impacting the eastern seaboard, and one of the elements particularly was our electrical grid. It was a very fruitful exercise in terms of giving staff, particularly this exercise, we were able to engage some of our middle or entry-level staff in what is required in terms of addressing an incident like this. And I just want to thank everybody who participated that day. I see, Tom, you were there. Thank you very much. It was the day of graduation, and you gave up your morning despite having to plan for the afternoon, so thank you. We were able to attend the 149th commencement at Greenwich High School. It was a wonderful event. Dr. Winters and his team do a superb job without incident, and we wish all those grads well. This past Sunday, I had a brief appearance down at the Glenville Fire Station. The volunteer company finally procured the necessary dollars to acquire a brush and tactical truck. I believe it costs $309,000. The funds were raised over 3 years, and the purpose of the vehicle really is to get into some of the more narrow and dense areas of our northern country to address either fires or some type of rescues. They did have one call already where it was a fire call that it was resourceful, so I want to thank them for their efforts, because it did take them 3 years to get the money to buy the truck. Monday, John, I think you were there. I did not attend, but the Greenwich Preservation Network held the dedication of the Strickland Road Historic District marker. These are markers that that offshoot of the Historical Society have been working to place throughout the town with appropriate and accurate description of those areas, as well as the QR code, I believe it's called, where you can scan your device and get more information. You were there, right?
Yep.
And so that's...
You didn't see my picture.
No, you didn't stand out too well this time. Other items, it's nice when citizens send letters of acknowledgement for the work that our professional staffs do. Received a couple of notes over the last few weeks about our Department of Public Works Highway Division. One is acknowledging those who participated in the Junior League's Touch-A-Truck, and they expressed particularly thanks to Carmine Villello, Jay Clifford, Christian Marchand, Benjamin Fumega, and Chad Weiss and Philip Bincoli. Also received a letter from the residents of Booth Court, Booth Terrace, for appreciation to Highway for making significant cleanups in the roadsides along that cul-de-sac. I believe yesterday we received a very pleasing envelope contribution. The Junior League provided their 2018 installment of designated funds for the construction of the community pool. This was a check in the amount of $903,500, reflecting the capital campaign cash gifts between June 22nd, 2017 and June 22nd, 2018. These were acknowledged and receipted by the town treasurer, and we're again very thankful for this partnership that's resulted in tomorrow's ribbon cutting. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. for those who are interested. There will be the ceremonial ribbon cutting of the pool at 10, and then it will be open for use at noontime. So we are again thankful, very thankful for the efforts of the Junior League, and they're raising the $2.5 million toward the pool, and I believe they are now within $125,000 of completing their goal. That's quite an effort, I think, and we're thankful. Friday, just as another park enhancement, there'll be a ribbon cutting at the Binney Park to acknowledge the new playground that's been installed there. And of course, next week, there'll be the annual July 4th ceremony out here celebrating the nation's founding. It starts at 9 a.m. and is open to the public. That concludes the updates. Under 4, old business. Today we are receiving officially the report from the Hillside Road Working Group. This group was established in March with the purpose to ensure Greenwich High School's compliance with the planning and zoning site plan approvals and to provide for the safety and security of the neighborhood and school community. Mr. Branyan dutifully and effectively oversaw that, and we're thankful to him. He's with us today, as well as a team of town and school officials who met, and I just want to acknowledge each of those individuals publicly. Tom Bobkowski, the Director of School Safety and Residency, Ashley Cole, who's a neighborhood representative, Katie DeLuca, Town Planner, Elizabeth Dempsey, Neighborhood Representative, Jim Heavey, Chief of Police, Jim Michael, Deputy Commissioner of Public Works, Stephen Miller, Neighborhood Representative, Patrick Smythe, Sergeant, Greenwich Police Department Traffic, Phil Walklet, Senior Security Guard, GHS, and Chris Winters, Greenwich High School Headmaster. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Branyan to share with us the overall synopsis of it. And just as intent, I do intend to move our acceptance of it after we take comment from members of the board in question.
Thank you, Peter. Very briefly, as the chair of the working group, I'll just provide a summary of the report. You've already went through their charge when it was created, and the members, several of the members are in the audience today. But just very briefly on the page 1 of the report, it highlights all the overview that the first selectman just gave, but we met over 10 times from the middle of April to just about 2 weeks ago in end of June. And we had 3 outcomes. One of the outcomes was on page 2 of the report, and enclosure number 1, which is the headmaster sent a letter out to the parents reminding them of the pickup procedure, and we've included the letter in the map to that. Also, part of the charge was the compliance with P&Z. So enclosure 2, we included the 8 items that we found that needed corrective action. We took the letter that P&Z dated December 28, 2010. We broke it down, and there was actually 83 paragraphs in that letter. We went paragraph by paragraph and made a consensus of whether or not an item was in compliance or not. We came up with 8 that needed to be further reviewed to become into compliance. And in enclosure 2, or page 4 of the report, we list those items, the corrective actions, and a timeline to bring them into compliance. And the third outcome of the report is enclosure number 3. We have come up with 19 recommendations, And just to highlight a few of them, I won't go over all 19 of them, but if you start on page 5 of the report, you see that the report's organized into three sections. So each department has a overall responsibility of point to the recommendations. But the most important recommendation is on page 5, number 1, and I will read this one. It's our preamble, and it's the overarching theme and the grounding point that all of the decisions should be filtered through, and that preamble is all potential improvements must be made with the consideration that GHS is in a residential zone. And we purposely put that number 1, purposely put that as a preamble, because I think that's an overall driving force that needs to be considered when we make these recommendations. Just under the Greenwich Public Schools, there's 11 recommendations that they should be point on. Several of them should be able to be implemented without significant hardship or budgetary issues, and we believe they would have a positive impact on the campus operations. One of the biggest one is item number 9, which is the implementation of the traffic consultant. The group spent a long time on making sure the language was right, trying to make it as broad scope as possible. And the goal is to have preliminary findings in the fall of this calendar year. Under Public Works, the biggest item of discussion was the recommendation number 12, which was that Public Works should immediately reconsider the striping plan on Hillside Road. This was a major point of discussion within the group, and they would like the Public Works to reconsider and reevaluate the striping plan on Hillside. Collaboration section, there was about 4 items listed there for collaboration. I think the most important one is number 17, just highlighting the importance of greater coordination between internal and external renters, as well as avoiding concurrent start and end times, again, to mitigate the impact to the high school operations and Parks and Rec operations to the overall neighborhood. And the last recommendation is number 19, is the concern the group has is, although we've met over 10 meetings and work in between those meetings, that our time, energy, and effort, we just don't want to produce a written report and then have it sit without substantial changes to the area. So to that end, we've made a recommendation that we would reconvene in the fall, winter of 2018 for the status check, review the progress made on the consultant report that was referenced in item number 9. Although the report before you was unanimously approved by the working group, I would be remiss if I didn't say we were not without our differences. And I think 2 points are important to highlight for the group. One of the frictions we had was making recommendations that would potentially conflict with the P&Z approval. For example, any changes to on-street parking would change the number of parking spots, which would then be in conflict with the approvals received by P&Z. Any modifications would require the school system to go before P&Z and seek a modification. The concern that the group had was if you're going to present in front of P&Z, logically they would request data and studies to support the recommendation. So absent those, it would be difficult to present a recommendation without the data. I think it's important to mention that the issue was not necessarily the merits of the recommendation, but rather the ripeness or timing of the data to support the request. And the other issue, the tension, if you will, with the working group was that we trying to make adjustments to the traffic without applying, I'll call it systems thinking to the problem. The issues on Hillside Road are, as we know, are interrelated and interdependent parts. Changing one part of the system generally will have an impact on other parts, but also the system as a whole. We eventually reached consensus to allow the traffic consultant to study the entire area rather than let, I believe, lay people make traffic adjustments. Again, the merits of the recommendation were not necessarily the concern. The concern was the second and third order effects that we would make in isolation without an overall system approach. Those are a very high overview of the report. Certainly, we'll attempt to answer any questions that you may have. And when we're done with the Q&A section, I do have a motion for your consideration.
for my colleagues first, if they have questions or comments.
I have two questions. One, I'd like to ask a question of one of the homeowners, if you would. Since this started, at least for me, and I think for my colleagues too, with the concerns expressed by the homeowners at a meeting which we had where we were considering other issues, so to speak, related to Hillside. I guess my question is very simple. At least as of today, are you satisfied? Are you comfortable with where we're at?
I think a lot of progress was made, and I appreciate Ben's leadership of the group. I felt like we had...
Could you go to the microphone, please?
Thanks. Thank you, Elizabeth.
I think we were appreciative of the working group, so thank you for that. I felt like Ben ran a wonderful process where we could get our views expressed. I think there was frustration at times about pushing. I do understand about the consultant, and I sometimes feel that considerations outside of the P&Z violations were scuttled to the consultant, somewhat understandably, but I think more could have been done to discuss possible solutions, and instead we got extreme options presented, such as widening the roads. We had sometimes intimidating responses about losing our mailboxes and eminent domain, and that part of the process was frustrating because I think constructively we wanted to address concerns about the restriping. We did research, we talked to Connecticut State designers, and they had big concerns about it. So the reaction from the working departments was not receptive, and it felt a little bit difficult, but I will say progress was made, and honestly, some of the toughest decisions were pushed aside to the consultant. So I think the answer would be I'm appreciative of the progress that was made, but I think the toughest decisions lie ahead.
Just if I may ask, what departments were you referring to?
I'd be happy to talk about that at another time.
Okay. But I gather, just so we're clear on this, and I was going to ask Ben this question anyway, and I want to express what Peter already expressed, which is gratitude to Ben and to all of you for the process, and you have acknowledged that in and of itself was an accomplishment without regard to whether or not it was perfect.
100%.
So that goes without saying, even though I've just said it. But my question to you, and I was going to put it to Ben, just reading the report, it's fair for us to conclude, is it not, that this is an ongoing process. I mean, there's a lot here that has not been dealt with. And while you may have made strides, and I'm delighted that you did, there's a lot more to be done. And I think, as you put it, a lot of the big decisions have been kicked off. Is that a fair statement?
To some, yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, I would agree.
Okay. Ben, am I correct that this is going to be an ongoing process?
Yeah, you are correct. It's an ongoing process. What I would add to that is, again, this report isn't perfect. Never, and I think you acknowledge that, and I never presented it was perfect. I think what we were able to do is have a framework now that clearly shows the responsible parties and what needs to be done to make progress to that end. It won't be done overnight, but now we have a framework that clearly has the departments with responsibility, corrective action for the compliance. I'll be the first to admit that the compliance piece took up significant amount of our time, which why we had to then extend the original deadline in order to get to the recommendations. But we could still be meeting, but I think a deadline gives us the time to work within it, because there's ample discussion that will occur. But you're absolutely right. This is not a done deal, and that's why the last recommendations the group had was to reconvene to work towards it.
Let me be clear. Nothing I've said detracts from the fact that you guys did a terrific job, and I echo, as I said, what has already been said, that we are very appreciative of what you've done so far, and candidly look forward to your proceeding as you go forward.
Thank you. Do you have anything to say?
Just one thing. The preamble to the recommendations, all potential improvements must be made with the consideration that GHS is in a residential zone. I think that says it all.
Great, thank you. So just to put a fine point in, touch on just three things. So framework, you've done that, and thank you. That's really what we have established, which we did not have. Collaboration, sounds like everybody worked well together, even if they didn't 100% agree, and that, I think, in this day and age is monumental. And then, really, I think, and I'm open to suggestions on this from John or Sandy. What we're really looking for, I think, is ongoing oversight and then implementation. So, Ben, I know that you and I have talked about that, and you would try to put forward a resolution that this board can pass that not just accepts the report, but demonstrates our desire to see those issues addressed with the timetable.
Should there be, and I have not seen the proposed motion, should there be some sort of ongoing plan, some sort of periodic report back to us so that this doesn't fall between the cracks? And
Exactly, yeah. Here, take a look. This is just something suggested, but it needs something. Ben, did you have something in addition to this?
what I, just having read that, and that looks fine, except I would add at the end of it, and I'd be fairly specific, that the committee, if that's what it is, report back to the board, and I'm making this up, in its October or November session. You guys pick which is the appropriate time period. But the problem with all these things, and I don't mean this particular one, but generally, is it requires staying on top of it. It's just too easy to let it go. So if November is the right time, Ben, I turn to you to say what might be a right time for a further follow-up report.
I would suggest an October date, and if we do, I think that allows you to present stuff that occurred over the summer, progress made, the school system made with the consultant. By that date, I anticipate having greater understanding of their project schedule, and then we can report back future dates.
Great. I would suggest the second meeting in October to give you some time into October too. So whatever the second meeting in October is, if that works for everybody else.
Barbara, to be unfair, do you have that date? I don't remember.
Neither of us knows the date.
I'll look it up. I agree with what you, so at our October.
Question.
Yeah, sure. One moment.
25th.
Yes, when?
An additional comment? that you
Sure.
can add?
Sure.
This is the appropriate time.
Sure.
Good morning. My name is Wynn McDaniel, and I'm a resident of District 7, which also includes both Greenwich High School and Hillside Road. I am a chair of District 7 RTM, but my comments today are as an individual. I have been following the many articles and letters in the local papers and have attended many of the working group sessions as an observer. I commend the Selectmen for forming this working group to address the neighborhood concerns. It was a great idea, and you included key members of both the town and the neighborhood. While there were meaningful actions as an outcome of the working group that involves improvements to drop-off, pick-up, police enforcement, and a review of the traffic conditions imposed by P&Z and their approval of MISA, I believe the real key to a long-term solution will be the outcome of the traffic study on Hillside Road. As I understand it, the final study will not be available until the end of the year, followed by more review by the working group and then implementation. As an outsider looking in, it appears that the timing for any conclusions based on the study will be many months out, meaning that whatever solution is ultimately reached, the traffic issues on Hillside Avenue will not be improving anytime soon. Neighbors of the high school have been very patient, living through major construction with MISA and now changed traffic patterns, mostly as a result of MISA. This has become a critical safety issue for these residents. I strongly recommend you adopt a short-term compromise pending the outcome of the traffic study, which would include increased traffic enforcement, a restriping of the road, and reduce, not eliminate it, student parking on the street, perhaps restoring the lottery system for parking that used to be in place many years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Wynn. Any other comments? If not, I would move acceptance of the report of the working group, Hillside Road Parking, with the Board of Selectmen expressing their thanks to the members of the working group for their efforts, and strongly encourage Greenwich Public Schools and Town of Greenwich departments, particularly the Department of Public Works and Parks and Recreation, to work without delay to implement the recommendations as presented. The ultimate goal is to strike a balance between Greenwich High School's operation and residents having a peaceful enjoyment of their neighborhood. We request that the working group report back to the Board of Selectmen at our October 25th, 2018 meeting as to their progress. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much, and Sergeant Smythe, thank you. I know that you'll be on the enforcement detail, so you're our go-to guy. And thank you, Sandy and John, for the next item under new business, something we routinely see as we get into the summer months with a couple of organizations holding carnivals and events. This is a road closure request from St. Roch Church in Chickahominy, and it is for Hamilton Avenue and St. Roch for the annual St. Roch Feast. And Jackie Buckins is here. I know that you worked with the folks in PV Traffic, and this is similar to what's been done the last, I don't know, several years.
Come up to the microphone, please.
Hi.
Good evening.
So I should be very easy, but the map is the same map we've used over the last 2 years for the road closure for St. Roch's Feast, with the details on it for our dates and times, August 8th through 11th, and our road closure times are 6 to 11 p.m. And we have Greenwich Police on hand at our event as well.
And for those who don't know, the organization pays for the police control for these events.
Yes, we do.
Any questions?
This goes on over 3 days? Is that
It's 4 days.
4
It's
days?
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They're all evenings, and it's been an annual event for the past, I think we've renewed it in the past over 7, 8 years. Yeah, it's a fundraising for the church, and it's a community event.
Okay, is there a motion to accept the proposed road closure for the annual St. Roch's Feast
So moved.
second?
without objection?
Thank you again.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a initial presentation by the Greenwich Housing Authority for the town of Greenwich. For those who do not know, the Housing Authority is independent of the town of Greenwich, and while this board appoints the commissioners, they operate independent in terms of their budgeting and so forth from the town. They're here today with a fairly exciting proposal, which is to request this board's consideration for municipal improvement to add 51 units of senior or disabled housing over at the McKinney Terrace development. This development was established in the mid-'80s on the property of the former Byram School, and has been home to family and senior housing. So with us today, we have Anthony Johnson, who is the Executive Director, as well as Sam Romeo, who's the Chairman of the Board of Commissioners, and Lizette Contreras? Am I pronouncing Contreras? So I know that you presented us with the materials. The floor is yours to discuss the proposal, and of course, you've outlined the elements of it.
Good morning.
So,
Thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. We're very excited about it. This is one of the state phases and that we have planned over the next 5 to 6 years moving forward. We're very excited about this particular project by adding more affordable senior and disabled units into our portfolio. What I'd like to do is read a little article or excerpts from an article that was in the newspapers about affordable housing. A Stanford resident making minimum wage this year would need to work 3 full-time jobs, 120 hours a week, to afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a downtown, according to figures released this week by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. The same holds true for a person looking for a rental 2-bedroom in Greenwich. The hypothetical worker making Connecticut's mandated $10.30 an hour would only be slightly better off than someone renting a 1-bedroom. The person would need to would have to work more than 2 full-time jobs. The data highlights an expanding divide between the wages of a living cost of living as cities across the nation grapple with the housing crisis. The housing crisis is growing, especially for the lowest income workers. Coalition President Diane Yentl told the Washington Post, "The rents are far out of reach from what the average renter is earning." A full-time worker must make at least $22 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the U.S. without spending more than 30% of its income on rent, the study shows. The wages derived from the U.S. Census Bureau and the Department of Housing and Urban Development data show that the worker making a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour would need to work 99 hours a week to make rent. This year, there is nowhere in the U.S. where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a 2-bedroom unit. And I think we're going to try to make a big dent in that. In central Greenwich, a resident would need to make $41.54 an hour or $86,000 a year if working a 40-hour work week for a 2-bedroom unit, or $32,088 or $32.88 per hour, or $70,000 a year for a 1-bedroom unit. We're going to change that. Jason Sabin, president of Inspira, which has prioritized building deeply affordable units in Stanford for a working class, said affordable units are needed only to cease the vibrant cease the work that the people who make things work in the towns. Waiters, waitresses, certified assistants can't live where they serve. So we certainly want to be able to afford, senior housing, which would open up some other housing for us in our other properties to accommodate others, because we do have other plans moving forward. Just in some of the zip codes here in Greenwich, the amount of money needed in zip code 06878, $49 an hour for a 1 or 2-bedroom apartment. 06878, $34 an hour. 06830, $42 an hour. And 06831, $57 an hour. Now, these are numbers that, were compiled from HUD. The coalition figures are fair market rents, which they had put together. So this, as you can see, I think is a really beautiful looking building. It's going to be located on property that we currently have a 99-year lease with the town of Greenwich, and it was only going to add to the area. We're not going to, I know we're going to be going through planning and zoning. We have all the other hurdles to do, testing, everything else, which we will perform. They will be seniors, so I don't think it'll be an impact on traffic. A lot of them will be, we're at the bus line, there's a CVS around the corner, so it also blends into the community, being close to transportation. The school system will not be affected by this because they're seniors and disabled, so we feel pretty good about it. And what I'd like to do this time is turn it over to Tony, just to give you, the board, an update on the progress that we have made in the last, 5 to 7 years, moving forward in the town of Greenwich and creating affordable housing and trying to put a different face of the Greenwich Housing Authority that people really don't see, but we like to promote that. Tony? The amount of money.
Can I just ask a couple questions about this? Is just that might just help to enumerate, even though it's in the letter. So, 51 units, you're financing. If you just want to tell us that, it's in the letter, but so people out there know how you're financing it, because I think it's
No town money.
right. So it says here 4% tax credits with commercial bank loans and other debt instruments. So pretty much private.
Private finance.
Private financing, no government financing.
Actually, no state money either. It's 4% tax credits are federal credits that come from the federal government through the state. The 4% equates to about 30% of development costs, and the rest would be debt financing through instruments that we could get the best rates and terms for.
And a question I just have as a follow-up on that, just again, since it's a 99-year lease, you've got, what, I haven't even done the math in terms of 85, 95, 05. So it's 30 years, so you have 60 some odd years?
Exactly.
That certainly is ample, but with some, I know, people look at that and there's no need to revise the lease and extend it to secure the financing. There's adequacy within the current lease term of 60 some odd years that.
Yeah, I don't think so at this point, because we have 60-plus years on the lease. And actually, you gave us that ability not to extend the term of the lease, but to actually seek financing, because that's what we did with the first two phases of the property, when we developed the senior property building, as well as when we developed the family units. So those actually had debt instruments attached to them. The senior building actually still has some debt associated with it. So you've given us that ability to sort of go out. I don't think financiers would be concerned with that, because we'll only be looking at a 30, 35-year amortization on the building. So we don't.
Okay. And then I just, two more questions. One, if you could just review how one would go about qualifying for an apartment. Like you could explain just publicly, and then
Sure.
The age requirement again.
Sure, actually. For senior disabled buildings, for a disabled person, it's just a person that has to be an adult and be physically, mentally disabled. So that there is no criteria for that. For seniors, it's age 62 and over. So anyone age 62 and over can qualify. The base income for one person in family housing would be about $48,000 in income. Now, to understand that, which is the most important thing, which I would like the residents of Greenwich to know, doesn't mean you have to be asset poor to live in our family housing. So long as your net income, even from your $1 million when you sold your home in the bank, as long as you're not generating in excess of $48,000 as a single person, you actually can still be housed in our properties.
And what is it for a couple?
About 58. I can get you the exact numbers on.
That's something I never realized. I'm ashamed that if you had, I thought if you had assets, that would work against your eligibility.
Only the income on the asset.
Only the income on the assets. Yeah, so if you, for example, if you're not doing really well in the stock market, or you have it in a safe investment, just bonds, and you're earning 2%, we actually, if you don't, even, the rule is that we impute an interest rate as well, which is less than 2% based on federal regulations. So it's going to be very difficult to, for some seniors to actually reach that threshold of passing $48,000 a year. So it's very important. I mean, that's an important thing to know. We actually have had people there. You inherit money. You may not have earned a lot of money.
This is a silly question, but is it taxable income?
Is it taxable?
No. Are you measuring taxable income? Someone has $100 million in municipal bonds,
Yes.
which are not taxable income.
Oh, no,
They
that
have
wouldn't.
$48,000 or not?
No, that wouldn't apply. Yeah, we would impute an interest rate
Okay.
on that $100
That's
million.
all I'm getting at.
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
And then this is now going back to just, I know this is a rendering, but what is the material? Is it brick? I mean, like, what is it going to be envisioned as? Because the buildings now are brick there.
Right now, it's an entire brick building. As we look at the financing, that's why I gave you an estimate of what it would cost between, 11 and 15 million. If we did the entire brick facade, obviously that would be a very expensive thing. We may adjust it from, just have a core base brick and then do something higher. Once we get into the financing and get some prices in terms of construction, we would like to see it being an entire brick building. That's what we would like it to be. So that's why we've designed it in that fashion, to be that way.
The ideal thing too is, once we get through the zoning process and all the other, things that we have to do, we could have this building up in a year, which is very exciting to us.
Is the 4% how does the 4% relate to the 11 to 15?
The 4% credit, again, there are two types of credits in Connecticut or in the country. There are 4% and 9% credits. A 4% credit basically equates to 30% of the development costs.
My question was, is the 11 or 15 take account of the 4%, or is the 4% of the 11 or 15?
It's 4% of the 11 or 15.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
it
was my
doesn't
question.
go either way. It's all dependent on what your total development costs are, and then the cost of the base development. For example, if you had commercial space in here, that could not be equated and calculated in the 4%. So it'd be a pullout.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Jen.
No, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I took
Oh, no
you off
problem.
that.
That was great.
I just wanted to, well, I had those thoughts and before I forgot, ask them, but go ahead.
Sure,
You were
no
gonna
problem.
set up.
So, again, thank you for letting us present this today, though, and we're really excited about the building. But I think Sam wanted me to speak to just some of the things that we've done over the last few years that have been very exciting for the Housing Authority. As you know, we put in 11 new units at Adams Garden. Those units were leased up immediately before. As soon as we opened up, they were completely leased. No one's moved out. They're operating beautifully. As you've been through the buildings, they're beautiful buildings. We love it. The families love it. In addition to that, we've invested probably in excess of $15 million over the last 5 years, just investing in our own properties. We've done new roofing, new windows, kitchens, 48 kitchens at Town Hall Annex. We just did those kitchens. We did 110 bathroom renovations
Greenwich
at
Close.
Wilbur Pack. Greenwich Close, we've done, as you know, a lot of renovations there in terms of just beautifying and improving the core backbone structure of the building.
I might add, though, the kitchens are granite countertops, cherry cabinets, stainless steel appliances. And when you tell people about affordable housing and you see the quality of what we did, they're just amazed.
Yes. And now we're looking to close for Armstrong Court the 18 units of townhouses on top of Hamilton Avenue. So we're waiting to close our financing with the state of Connecticut. The appraisal is going on right now. Once that appraisal is done, we'll be looking to close that and start construction in the late fall of this year.
That's phase one.
Phase one.
Of probably 3 or 4 different phases when we're going to do a total remake of Armstrong Court, and it will not look like Armstrong Court of today.
Yeah, the actual buildings 1, 3, and 6, which I didn't bring the map to explain to you, is Phase 2 of the development. And that Phase 2 right now is a $16 million renovation, complete gut renovation of those buildings. We're waiting to hear what the financing, are we going to get approval from the state of Connecticut on the financing? Because that's a little different. It has tax credits in it, but because of the deeper rental discounts that we're providing, we actually have to go out and get other financing from the state of Connecticut along with other debt. So that's a little different, a little harder to do because of the state's financial situation. But hopefully, they will fund us for Phase 2 of that, and we'll be able to move along with Phase 2. And then, based on Phase 3, which will be some of the other buildings, if the state's not in the business of financing affordable housing, then we'll figure out a way to rehab those buildings. We'll come up with a financing plan to do that, and I think I can. I've thought about it. It's a much more difficult and expensive process, and it also changes who we can serve and how many of the people at the lower and middle tier that we can serve, but we can get it done. It just changes the structure of who we want to serve and how we serve them.
Tony, is some of the money that comes to the state from the feds, or is it just exclusively derived from state?
Yeah, actually, the tax credits are just credits based on the size of the state's population. Every state gets them. Then the state decides how to divide them up into low income and other tax credits. And so those are just credits that are given, and then you sell them to a private market. So you take the credit that you're given. Let's say we're given over $500,000 a year for 10 years. It's usually a 10-year process, so $5 million in credits toward the development of that. You then take that to the private market and a syndicator or a direct market if you have that kind of connections. And you go to the financial markets, and a company that is in very good financial position, meaning their earnings have been very high, they can use these credits to offset their income. So it's a dollar-for-dollar offset of income earnings to the purchaser of the credits. So it's a twofold process. The company that buys the credit gets a benefit, and the federal government gets a benefit by improving housing without actually having to invest any money in the process. So that's how it works.
Thank you. Thanks.
You sell it to them at a discount?
Actually, it depends on, they're not discounted, it depends on the market you're in, and it's also dependent on what's going on in the marketplace as a whole. For example, prior to the change in the tax law, Fairfield County was getting over $1 per credit. So you actually had investors paying more for the credits than the dollar that they were.
So it may be more, it may be less.
Maybe more, maybe less. We're looking at right now on our other transaction, we're looking at somewhere around 95 cents.
5% discount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
Also, I just wanted to provide you copies of a letter we received in the office yesterday from the Commission on Aging in support of the proposal.
It's in the back of this package.
Yeah, I think we saw
Oh, yeah.
that.
I didn't have it on
Yeah.
mine. I didn't,
Okay.
was it on?
Just one more thing like
I've seen
that,
it.
for the record, what is it, like about 1,200 units we have?
1,200 approximately, yeah.
1,200 units that we have in the town of Greenwich for affordable housing. And I travel the state a lot. When I come into other municipalities and talk to other people outside of the area in Fairfield County, they're amazed that they say the town of Greenwich provides 1,200 units of affordable housing. And I think that's far more than some of our other neighboring towns provide for low and moderate income housing. So we're very proud of that. We like to put a good face on our housing authority, and we hopefully that we have the support of the community to continue to do the mission that we're charged to do of creating affordable housing for low and moderate income people. Thank you.
You've done quite a bit of work over the last several years. Thank you for
Thanks to
those
you
efforts. Thanks.
and your support.
As you know, it's not a requirement, but I've establish the practice more so that when we have MIs, we hear them at one meeting, we vote on the next. It gives people who may have interest when they hear about it a chance to talk with us before it goes on. So we will then take this up again. Our next meeting is
July the 12th.
July the 12th. If there's no issues, it gets approved and then sent to P and Z, and you're on your way through the land use process. But I
And we're ready to hit the ground running and get this project going, because we have a lot more plans for housing in the upcoming years. So I thank you again for your time and your support of this project.
Thank you. Thank you both, and it's a very attractive project, so thank you. I just wanted to share with Sandy and John, and input and updates, the meeting that occurred yesterday, because it relates to land use. You gentlemen may both know that right now the P and Z is looking at making some changes to their processes. There's 3 items that are before them. Katie DeLuca was kind enough yesterday to meet with a number of neighborhood representatives to explain what is being proposed. There's been concern, objection to how fast the decision-making process is going on these proposed changes to what they refer to text amendments, and the role that Planning and Zoning's Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals have with special exception and, I have to get my notes out. You know it better than I do. Special permit, thank you. You're sharp. Special exception, special permit, it would essentially consolidate under one entity rather than the 2. Those were 1 and 2. Then the third one has to do with FAR as it relates to educational institutions. And having just gone through our discussion on Hillside, you can
Yep.
imagine there's a lot of, all that was being asked for, frankly, was more time. So I went to the meeting, and I'm thankful to Katie, with all these folks. They wrote a little request to P and Z to say, please withdraw the application for consideration on July 10. We'd like to have more time to understand it, work through the RTM Land Use Committee. I got an email from Mr. Carter, who's in District 6, who's Vice Chair of the Land Use Committee,
Yeah,
requesting me the same.
As did I.
I signed off on that request. I think, it's not, nothing bad can come out of giving a little bit more time for people to understand something that may have implications. I understand from Ms. DeLuca today that the commission did not, as of the moment, acquiesce to that request, so it is going forward, but she's going to work with them to try to further disseminate what is the change, how will it impact the town, its property owners, neighborhoods. But I do wanted to share that with you because I'm sure you're getting communication.
I received a communication, it sounds like the same one you got, from a gentleman who said he was the vice chair of the Land Use Committee. He alluded to this. I told him, quite frankly, I had no idea what he was talking about. I generally thought more time sounded fine since I had no idea what this was about. I invited him to come see me if he'd like, to explain to me what the issue was and what his concerns are, since that has not been brought to us. I have not heard back from him, but if someone is that concerned, I would think that at a minimum, it is worthy of taking the time to understand and to reflect upon whatever the changes they want are.
Yeah, thank you. So that's basically what was asked for, but I wanted to share with you, because often what happens is people go to all 3 of us independent, and so we're working toward the same objective, independent, which creates a waste of time.
Help me a little bit with what the process is. So they're asking us, and someone apparently has asked P&Z, who you said has not consented, to, quote, more time. What's the process? What happens here?
I believe any changes to the zoning regulations are within the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Although we don't have, Mr. Wetmore, you're actually here, so you can help me out. If in fact people want to appeal those changes, who do they go to?
They go to Superior Court.
So this board has no role in zoning regs.
That's where I was going. So we have no role. This is interesting but academic.
Well, actually, we do have a role.
We appoint the people,
You
but
appoint the
yeah.
people.
Well, I was going to say, other than the power to appoint, which okay. But that's it. Other than that, we have no role, so.
But people will tell you have a role. That's just the way the role works. You'll be responsible for everything in the eyes of people, so.
I was just curious why this gentleman was writing us, or writing me, and now obviously writing the rest of you, and asking that we do something when apparently there is nothing we can do, other than endorse his request for more time.
One of the things that Katie is going to do is put together a little primer on this as a way to help educate people, which I said we would all welcome, because I was in the same boat as you in terms of not knowing really what the nature of this was until I sat in this meeting, and I got 80% of it.
Why would it be appropriate, not why would it not, but would it be appropriate and useful if this board were to write a letter to the P&Z asking them as a matter of courtesy, if nothing else, to defer and give the additional time that's requested so that we too can consider whatever the issue is and give them whatever comments we may have, if any, that could be helpful to them.
I've already done that by signing this from them, but I'm happy to reaffirm it. I signed on with the other, I think there were 12 people there requesting it, but we can do it
Why
from the
not one
board.
from the board?
Yep.
That says that, lends whatever imprimatur we have
It does.
to it.
No, it does. I think that's, Barbara, you basically could just take this language, which was drafted yesterday, which reads, "We are requesting the Planning and Zoning Commission withdraw the above referenced application for consideration at your July 10th, 2018 meeting. We further request that this application be resubmitted by the Planning and Zoning staff for consideration by P&Z in October 2018. This is being requested to allow our various communities and the RTM Land Use Committee to educate Greenwich residents on the proposed amendments contained in the application and to allow for broader public comment on the proposal."
And have it come from the Board of Selectmen.
So you could just take this and
Yeah, that sounds
no,
perfect.
no pride of authorship. I don't think we'll be
Sounds-
accused of plagiarizing there.
Sounds
So
good.
do we just make a motion to that effect? Or is it technically it's not on our agenda because it was updating? I guess we could get in trouble for that, right? I mean,
Take it up under other business, Mr. Chairman.
all right, well, so let's, yeah, so make a motion that we want to take this up.
Okay, so move.
Okay, so the discussion is on the proposed text amendments that are before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we are desirous, through this motion that was just read, to request they withdraw the present application and resubmit it in October, allowing the community, the RTM, and residents a better time for better understanding.
Can we, as part of that, is it appropriate to request, or do we just do this individually, that they tell this board what it is they are doing or wanting to do and why? I mean, it would seem to me appropriate that they might consider telling us what it is they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah, we can add that to it. I agree. You agree?
Yep.
So all in favor?
Yeah.
Yes?
And Barbara, you have a copy of this?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
That concludes items under new business. Is there any appointments or nominations? Do you have anything, John?
Nope.
Was there another meeting since we last met or no, of that?
There was a
snap?
meeting last week.
That concludes, then there's no nominations. Executive session to discuss pending litigation and settlement of claims. We'll need a motion to go into,
So move.
okay,
Second.
without objection. This is a resumption of the June 27th regular Board of Selectmen meeting. Is there a motion to return to public session?
So, second.
Without objection, the board reviewed several matters in executive session, notably settlement of real estate valuation claims, and at this time is prepared to take action. For purposes of consideration, call on Ms. Hines to read the proposed resolution.
Okay, this is docket number HHB CV 16-6029112S. It is for a settlement of a tax credit in the amount of $640,395 against future tax payments. If the plaintiffs were to have prevailed at trial, they would have been entitled to a cash refund of approximately $800,338 plus interest and costs.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Just for edification, it is a very significant amount. It's important to note that this is referencing Greenwich Office Park, which is property of several buildings, I believe 8 buildings, and therefore denoting the sizable credit that's being. So it's a moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Okay, the next case is docket number HHB CV 16-6034143S. It is parcel number 02-1508S. It is for a tax credit of approximately $25,042 against future tax payments. And if the plaintiff were to have prevailed at trial, they would have been entitled to a cash refund of approximately $99,103 plus interest and costs.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Without objection.
The next case is docket number HHB CV 16-6034142S. It is parcel number 02-1509S. And it is for a tax credit of approximately $27,850 against future tax payments. If the plaintiff were to have prevailed at trial, they would have been entitled to a cash refund of $50,580 plus interest and costs.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Without objection.
And the next one is docket number FST CV 16-6029029S, parcel number 10-1620. There is a proposed tax credit of approximately $4,901 against future tax payments. If the plaintiff were to have prevailed at trial, they would have been entitled to a cash refund of approximately $20,700 plus interest and costs.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Without objection.
The last one is docket number HHB CV 16-5018155S, parcel number 11-3058. A settlement of a tax credit of approximately $13,019 against future tax payments. If the plaintiffs were to have prevailed at trial, they would have been entitled to a cash refund of approximately $26,464 plus interest and costs.
So moved.
Okay, without objection. That concludes the business to come before the Board of Selectmen today. The next regular meeting is scheduled for
Thursday, July 12th.
12th at 10 a.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Without objection, 12:28.